This proof of concept is how I would change the Doom Eternal difficulty settings to make them more dynamic and varied, and even a special twist on Ultra Nightmare. Follow along as I take you through the changes and see what a new kind of Doom Eternal combat could be like. Let's go. Here's how the enemies would look for I'm Too Young to Die. We have a Mancubus, a Hell Knight, and an Imp. The Knight provides the melee pressure, making sure I watch my movement while the Mancubus rains fire from the distance. Both are ground enemies. Keep this in mind for later. And of course we have the Fodder Imp providing support fire from a distance. Let's see how this fight would look. So as I predicted, the Knight comes close and the Mancubus fires from a distance. So let's take them out and see how difficult that is. We remove the Mancubi weak points, also something to teach the player. Remove the Mancubus, the Knight, and then finally the Imp. So how can we make this harder but more fair? For Hurt Me Plenty, we've changed some things a little. The Imp stays as support fire. The Hell Knight is upgraded to a Dread Knight. The Mancubus, he stays as fire. But now the important part here is we have added the Cacodemon. Now we not only have ground enemies, which have been upgraded, we also have aerial to worry about as well. He will also serve as the pressure unit, the Mancubus has the range, and the Caco, well, he's a little bit of both. Let's see how this fight would look. So as you see from the start, it's very similar to the last one, and we could definitely make use of the meat hook node a little better now. The first thing we're going to do is eliminate the Caco from the skies, so we can get rid of the aerial demon. This teaches the player to not only have to fight on the ground. So let's eliminate the weak points of the Mancubus, get rid of his range. We also see the Imp is nearby, take him out. And then finally the Dread Knight, who is very much pressure. This fight upgrades the player from what they first saw and keeps it in the same vein, but makes it a little harder. Now let's take a look at Ultraviolence. Things start to get noticeably harder at Ultraviolence, and this is where it gets a little more tricky and complicated. The Imp has been upgraded to a Stone Imp, because we want to give that fodder a little more of an aggressive, pushing pressure while making it a little trickier, but not too much. We've upgraded our Dread Knight up to a Baron because he's the next in class to go up, keeps the same style and vibe of the Hell Knight and the Dread Knight, but a little bit trickier as well. The Mancubus has been upgraded to a Cyber Mancubus because we want to keep that distance, that ranged unit on the ground, but make him a little bit harder, add some extra pressure. Now, from the skies, we still have our Cacodemon, you'll see why here in just a minute, but we've added another one to the mix to make things just a little trickier. See, this has a big up in the difficulty because at this point the player has understood the game and its mechanics, and now we're really starting to pressure them because Ultraviolence is where the test really begins. Now, let's take a look and see what that fight might look like. Okay, so absolutely right out the gate, you see there's a whole lot more pressure from the ground enemies. They're much more aggressive, and we can also tell that the Baron is angry. The Cacodemons are double firing down, so let's take a look here real quick. Pause them for a second. And of course now there are more enemies on the battlefield to make things tricky. So let's unpause and then start destroying them one by one. So our first target, we're going to drop the Ice Bomb. This here, as you see, as you just saw, we're using more equipment now that we're in the harder difficulties. We're moving more with the meat hook nodes. We're going for the weak points if they're available. In this case, well, they're really not. And we're also using equipment. If you noticed in the last two fights, when we had the Hell Knight and the Dread Knight, when we had just one Cacodemon, I didn't use equipment much. I did use the Sticky Bomb, but as you can see, it's becoming more and more necessary now. Let's continue the fight. Now we're going to worry about taking out one of the Cacos from the sky. We're going to also incorporate the Ballista, and as you can tell, it's a lot more dangerous. The damage comes a lot quicker. Now we would keep all of the damage on Nightmare, theoretically, but we have to move around so much more to avoid the same types of fights. Now that Stone Imp, we're going to go ahead and use a full auto to get rid of him. We could use a Destroyer Blade, but we'll worry about that later. Now the Baron, now that he's all alone, we are able to definitely change things up, make it a little bit easier. But wait, if this is UV, what is Nightmare? Let's take a look and see how that's going to be. Nightmare is where the gloves come off. Let's take a look at the choices we made and why. The Stone Imp remains the same. We want to have that fodder that is dangerous, but not too crazy. We'll leave him there as a Stone Imp. The Baron has been upgraded to an Armored Baron. Again, same in class, but now best in class, and we want to keep that Baron pressure and ranged as it is, but give the player an extra challenge for making him an even more difficult Baron. Now there's another way we can make things difficult. Yes, we added the spirit to the Cyber Mancubus. We want to keep the Cyber Mancubus there because he gives you that area of denial with the goo, makes it hard to maneuver in certain situations, forcing you to move around with your meat hook node in other ways. But we want to make him more difficult and introduce the spirit enemy concept to him. And also focuses on getting rid of the spirit. So in the skies, we have our Cacodemon that remains the same for the first. And we also have changed things. If you look, I bet you noticed him, the Pain Elemental upgrade. This is because we want to keep the air as a threat. It's something to accent and work together with the ground enemies down here, but we want to give the player a challenge, just not the regular Cacodemon, but the very pressureful Pain Elemental. So let's take these gloves off, as I said, and begin the fight now. Now, the first thing you will see is everything forces you to move. It is so fast. Everything pressures you while attacking you from a range, and you need to use your meat hook on the enemies, your ballista boosting, everything together has to be used for the whole picture. If you did your movement just as we did back on the first I'm Too Young to Die, you would probably die a very vicious death. So our first priority will be the Cyber Mancubus. He is very tanky when it comes to that spirit. So we're going to use the Ice Bomb as we get rid of the spirit. And you can tell. Now what happens? Now let's just let that spirit go. Let's let that spirit go. Take out this guy with the chainsaw. And now he jumps into the Pain Elemental, making things even worse. So you really have to decide what your priority is. Do you get rid of the spirit first? Do you make sure that you get rid of him so he cannot worry about any other enemies? And if you fail, look at this. It makes the Pain Elemental or something else in. So not only are you moving more when the combat, not only are you shooting more, everything coming together, you have to make so many more decisions and focus on where everything's going. And as you see, we lost our Armored Baron. Let's bring him back. But the pressure you're under is just immense. Now, here's another thing to consider too. You have different ways to deal with this Armored Baron. This Nightmare mode is teaching you so much about the game and giving you so many more options that it is almost not forcing your hand, but really motivating you. Like, hey man, you should really try this method of playing in whatever playstyle you use. And then when you finally get down to the Pain Elemental, if you leave him for last, you are able to remove the spirit. Now, what about Ultra Nightmare? I think we need to talk about it too. So let's finish off Pain Elemental and go to UN. Now, Ultra Nightmare, you may say, looks a little bit of the same, but I assure you it's not. While the enemies do remain the same, this is done for a reason. We have the Stone Imp, Armored Baron, Possessed Cybermank, Cacodemon, Pain Elemental, and we could add a Bloodmaker, but let's keep this simple. We can do that in another arena. What has changed here? Well, that's right. The enemies move faster. Yes, just like the classic games, their Nightmare mode was just like Ultraviolence with a couple other things, but faster and more aggressive enemies. This is for the masochist. The original Nightmare was not supposed to be actually serious, but people played it anyway. And you can find here how much more dangerous it is even yet. So if you have mastered your movement, if you've mastered understanding enemy spawns, where they are, everything that goes on, you could try this Ultra Nightmare mode. I wanted to make it different than permadeath because a lot of people want that extra challenge, but they don't want to die one time and just lose everything, right? So let's take a different approach here as to what UN could be. This makes the enemies faster, more aggressive, and really pushes you in a whole different way, as you can definitely tell here. We are able to use all of our equipment and miss the Ice Bomb, and you can tell just how fast they are. They don't do any extra damage, but the sheer speed makes them brutal. Let's find this imp. It really makes you think, how are you going to take down that spirit? What way will you do this to really focus in on that fight? So remember last time we took down that spirit first. Now we're actually going to do it last and see, because remember last time the Pain Elemental, he was inhabited by the spirit, and now he can't be once this Cyber Mancubus dies. Having this Ultra Nightmare mode is a little different. It is more of a joke mode, but it does show you that, hey, if you want to speed the enemies up, you make it a whole lot crazier and force the player to think in new, different ways. This is how I would do it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. My name is Allstin. Thank you for watching.